At the beginning of the story, we see a man kneeling while he was surrounded by different warriors. While on his knees, the man remembered his father's words to him. Our protagonist's father asked him to live for his clan. This meant that our MC should not desire anything, and he should just stay by his brother's side like a shadow. While our protagonist was thinking, someone walks up to him. The man said that it is insulting for a single knight to hold back the continent's strongest commanders. The commanders became ashamed when they heard this. With a smile on the man's face, he told our protagonist that he is very interesting. The man was not surprised to see this, because our protagonist was the brother of someone important. The man told our protagonist, whose name is Cyan Vert, that he is quite talented. Cyan was annoyed to hear what came out of the man's mouth. He called out the man's name, which was Boris. Boris smiled when he heard Cyan's voice. Cyan drew out his sword and asked Boris to tell him the person who ordered his assassination. He asked Boris if it was the Emperor that wanted his head. Cyan's sword released a small amount of dark energy. Boris was surprised to see the energy which the sword was emitting. He had only heard about the black fog in the rumors. Well, he used his hand to cover his nose due to how sickening the energy was. Cyan rose to his feet and unleashed a vast quantity of his power. Boris displayed no astonishment at this sight, as he was already aware that our protagonist was an assassin from Mist. According to Boris, Mist is an organization that is as elusive as fog to the Knights of Light. He informed our hero that he would report to his superiors that he had eliminated an impure entity associated with Mist. Cyan showed no concern for Boris's words, declaring that Boris would be rendered speechless by the time he was through with him. As our protagonist's energy gradually approached Boris, the sinister-looking priest advised him not to squander his efforts using his secret technique, revealing that the entire area was enveloped by a ninth-star magical barrier. Our hero recognized that he could not continue the fight. Understanding that he needed to evade the knights and reach his brother, he wished to disclose the true perpetrator of the assassination to his sibling. Cyan assumed a fighting stance and declared to Boris that he would simply slice through the barrier. Before our protagonist could act, he heard someone commanding him to halt. Boris moved aside and lowered his head in deference upon seeing this individual. Cyan was overcome with emotion when he beheld the person who had spoken to him. While gazing at this figure, Cyan recalled his father's words to him. His father had told him that his brother Ashel was an extension of the clan, and that Ashel Vert's success was also Cyan Vert's success. The person standing before Cyan was a knight. Cyan struggled to comprehend the situation, unable to accept that the culprit was his brother Ashel. Ashel grasped his sword and slowly approached our hero. Cyan collapsed to his knees, and when Ashel arrived in front of his brother, he could perceive his sibling's confusion. Cyan gazed upward at his sibling, requesting an explanation. Ashel informed our protagonist that he had fulfilled his responsibilities admirably, stating that Cyan had served the clan and himself well. Our hero was astounded by this revelation. Ashel told his brother that he merely wishes to alleviate his burden. Cyan grasped his weapon and began emitting a small amount of energy, inquiring if he had committed any wrongdoing. Ashel was taken aback by this question. He informed his brother that the dark mist enveloping him proves he's no longer human, labeling him a killer. The shadowy energy surrounding our hero intensified upon hearing this. Ashel shouted at his brother, accusing him of deceiving everyone for an extended period. He questioned our hero about whether he truly was unaware of his transgressions. Cyan couldn't fathom that Ashel had accused him of such serious wrongdoing, feeling irritated by his brother's words. The succession conflict within the Empire, the Demon King's assault, and the war to unify the continent. Cyan had assisted his brother in accomplishing all these endeavors by dedicating his life to serving him. Our hero slammed his fist into the ground, unable to accept that his brother was forsaking him, especially after he had worked so hard for 2 decades. As our protagonist's frustration grew, the dark energy around him thickened. Cyan stood up, resolving to handle matters his own way. He disregarded the possibility of danger, willing to do anything to confront his brother. Our hero unleashed an enormous quantity of mana and prepared to strike. The commanders were astonished to witness this, unable to believe Cyan still possessed so much mana. They were convinced that Cyan couldn't be an ordinary human. Cyan fashioned a mask with his mana and assumed a fighting stance, asking Ashel if he felt no shame. Cyan told his brother that he was wrong for trying to harm him out of fear. Ashel was irritated by these words. Cyan rushed to attack his brother, but Ashel easily evaded the assault. As our hero circled his brother, he hoped to finish him with a single strike. Cyan charged at his brother, aiming to strike Ashel in his weak point. Before Cyan's blade could make contact with his brother's back, a shield materialized before him. Cyan was shocked to see the barrier, noticing that Boris was the one casting the spell. Before our hero could take another step, Ashel attacked him, calling Cyan a pitiful wretch. Our protagonist released his grip on his weapon when struck. Ashel informed Cyan that he had intended to grant him a painless outcome due to their relationship. He asked his brother to explain why he revealed his true nature. Ashel told our hero that he had always known he was different. He informed Cyan that he had never fully trusted him from the beginning. Cyan was deeply affected upon hearing this. Ashel moved our hero to the ground and turned away, instructing his men to depart with him. While on the ground, Cyan lay in a pool of blood. As his awareness gradually faded, Cyan wondered if the end was near. He felt saddened, realizing he had lived such a challenging and misguided life. As Ashel walked forward, he heard someone approaching. Upon turning around, he saw his brother advancing towards him, blade in hand. Cyan shouted in frustration as he rushed to confront his brother. Our hero's sword neared Ashel's neck, but unfortunately, he was unable to complete the task. Ashel used his own sword to defend himself, stopping Cyan. The scene shifts, and we see a boy gasping for air as he clutched his neck. The boy's maid instructed him to prepare, stating that he could no longer sleep. The boy was surprised to see his maid, named Emily, in his room and asked her to explain her presence. The maid was puzzled by this inquiry. This boy turns out to be Cyan. Cyan was certain that he had last seen Emily 20 years ago and couldn't comprehend why she hadn't aged. As he looked around, our hero noticed that the room appeared exactly like the one he had occupied in his youth, with even the furniture arrangement being identical. Cyan struggled to understand the situation. He swiftly touched his face, realizing that he had reverted to being a child. While Cyan attempted to grasp his circumstances, Emily asked if he was stalling because he didn't want to train. She urged her master to make up his mind and proceed to the training grounds. Cyan was surprised by this, unsure which training Emily was referring to. Upon donning his attire, Cyan resolved to visit the training grounds. After observing his surroundings, Cyan became convinced that he had been transported back to the Vert clan duchy. He pondered whether he was experiencing a life review. As he gazed upon the individuals at the training area, our protagonist recalled an incident from 27 years prior, which transpired on March 1st of the Foundation year 985. This event occurred 1 year before our hero enrolled in the academy. The duchy conducts an annual dual training session, which Duke Vert, Cyan's father and the ruler of the duchy, typically attends, lending great significance to the occasion. Cyan's adversary was Kransvert, his half-brother of the same age. Kranz's mother is a woman named Margaret Erzeth, who is the Duke's wife. Consequently, Kranz garnered considerable attention despite being the same age as Cyan. Our protagonist was the illegitimate son, and after being ridiculed in the duel, he became an object of derision for all. Cyan recollected his father instructing him to take no action, and he remembered that his father ceased paying attention to him following the duel. Presently, the identical duel was about to commence. Emily implored her young master to simply capitulate. Cyan was astounded that even a maid was looking down on him. He unsheathed his sword and reassured her that he would be fine. When our hero drew his blade, he noticed something peculiar. Cyan couldn't comprehend why a rapier would feel so heavy. He realized that his strength matched that of his younger self. Our protagonist was certain that his current sensations were remarkably lifelike. He knew this wasn't a life review, and Cyan had never heard of any magic potent enough to create such vivid illusions. Our hero began to entertain the possibility that he might have genuinely traveled back in time. As Cyan pondered, the Duke signaled for the duel to commence. Kranz immediately lunged to assault his brother, urging Cyan to cease his contemplation. With a grin, Kranz swung his blade. Our hero noticed something peculiar when Kranz brandished his sword, observing that Kranz moved as sluggishly as a mollusk. Cyan cautiously sidestepped, evading his brother's strike. Kranz was astonished by this evasion. He pivoted and branded his brother a coward, attempting another assault on Cyan. Our protagonist effortlessly employed his sword to disarm Kranz, knocking the weapon from his grasp. Immediately following this, he struck Kranz's leg with a kick. The boy howled in agony and collapsed to the ground, where he began to weep. The Duke and his spouse were astounded by the turn of events. Margaret struggled to comprehend the sight of her cherished son prostrate on the floor. Cyan recognized that he could swiftly conclude the duel by positioning his sword at Kranz's throat, but our hero opted for an alternative course of action. In the past, Kranz had tormented our protagonist for his amusement, a pattern of bullying that persisted in the academy. Our hero resolved to trample his brother, intent on thrashing Kranz to such an extent that he would never contemplate any future transgressions. As Cyan approached his brother, he determined to forge a new path for himself. Upon seeing Cyan's advance, Kranz began to shriek. The scene transitions, revealing that our protagonist has thoroughly bested Kranz. Cyan was declared the victor of the duel. Following the contest, the Duke commanded Cyan to present himself, even clearing his schedule for the meeting. Cyan was startled by this development, pondering whether his triumph was truly so remarkable. The Duke even assigned Cyan an escort named Ulkin, a distinguished knight directly under the Duke's command. While traversing the corridor, Cyan observed Margaret approaching from the Duke's office. Our protagonist deduced that Margaret had been discussing her son with the Duke. Our hero felt pleased to see Margaret's expression, which suggested she had been affronted. Cyan chose to provoke Margaret, inquiring about Kranz's condition. Margaret was irritated by this query, astounded by Cyan's impudence in posing such a question after thrashing her son. She informed Cyan that he possessed remarkable audacity. As the two passed each other, Cyan remarked that duels typically result in injuries. Margaret was vexed by this comment, labeling our hero a bastard and asserting that illegitimate children shouldn't be treated as legitimate ones. With a vexing smirk, Margaret told our protagonist that he resembled his mother, describing Cyan's mother as a promiscuous woman. Margaret made it clear to our hero that he belonged on the streets begging for sustenance, urging Cyan to cease his resistance and acknowledge his place. Cyan became enraged upon hearing this, astonished that Margaret had actually crossed a line. He contemplated whether he should simply end her life. Cyan swiftly dismissed this notion. Smiling as he considered how he would torment Margaret, our hero reminded Margaret that he would be attending the academy alongside Kranz. Margaret failed to grasp Cyan's implication, requesting clarification. With a chilling grin, Cyan asked Margaret if she desired her child to complete his education with all limbs intact. He questioned whether she harbored concerns for Kranz. The Duchess was incensed by this, raising her hand to strike our hero. Before Margaret could lower her hand, Ulkin intervened, blocking her. He informed her that the Duke was urgently summoning Cyan, emphasizing that they could no longer delay. With a grave expression, Ulkin instructed the Duchess that they must depart. Margaret was stunned by Ulkin's demeanor, realizing she was powerless to harm Cyan. Cyan chuckled as he sheltered behind Ulkin, aware that Margaret was impotent. Within the duchy, the Duke's directives are supreme. Cyan was safeguarded by a knight acting under orders. Our hero was gratified to see that Ulkin was a knight who wouldn't yield even to the Duke's spouse. In the subsequent scene, we witness Cyan entering his father's office. He bowed his head and introduced himself as the youngest offspring of the Vert family. After his introduction, Cyan greeted his father. Our protagonist realized that 15 years had elapsed since he last engaged in a meaningful conversation with his father. The Duke bade his son to be seated. Cyan's father is known as Willius Vert, the great feudal lord of Velius, a feud situated in the western region of the Yushif Empire. Willius is also renowned as the guardian of the continent, a hero who long thwarted demonic invasions. Leveraging his exceptional magical prowess and worldly sagacity, Willius shouldered a burden that no one compelled him to bear. He carried this responsibility until his demise during the Demon King's army's invasion. The Duke's sole aspiration was continental peace. While others perceived Willius as a remarkable individual, Cyan held a divergent view. Cyan recollected his father as someone who relinquished his own autonomy, opting to dedicate his life to others. Our hero regarded his father as a foolish man. The Duke informed his offspring that his gaze tracked the blade, and he effortlessly evaded the strike. Cyan failed to comprehend his father's statement. The Duke reminded our protagonist that he had focused directly on the trajectory of Kranz's sword, and upon perceiving the path, Cyan easily sidestepped the assault. Willius inquired when Cyan had acquired sword-wielding skills. Cyan recognized that his father remained as perceptive as ever. He informed his father that he typically honed his swordsmanship nocturnally. Willius was astonished by this revelation, convinced that his son had never shown interest in swordsmanship. He asked Cyan to explain why he had concealed his exceptional abilities. Cyan told his father that he wished to avoid attracting attention. The Duke found this peculiar and questioned why Cyan had fought Kranz earnestly if he desired to remain inconspicuous. Cyan was at a loss for a response. Willius asked his son if it was truly necessary to thrash Kranz mercilessly. Our hero found this inquiry odd, but swiftly realized his father was attempting to gauge his capabilities. Our protagonist told Willius that he aimed to prove himself. Willius was surprised by this statement. Cyan informed his father that he wanted to demonstrate his superiority over Kranz, which is why he approached the duel seriously. Willius began to chuckle upon hearing this. He was pleased that his son provided a clear and concise answer, telling Cyan that he was quite level-headed. Willius was delighted to see that his son was talented. With a smile, Willius told his son that he would be an excellent supporter for Ashel. Cyan was shocked by this, realizing that despite taking a different path, he arrived at the same outcome. Our hero recognized that his father was obsessed with Ashel and clenched his fist in anger. Willius told his son that he would grant him anything he desired as a reward. Our protagonist became determined to thwart everything Ashel aspired to accomplish. With a smile, Cyan conveyed his wish to his father. The scene transitions, and we see Emily panicking. Emily couldn't believe that her master had told the Duke he wanted to go to the battlefront. Cyan informed his maid that nothing was certain yet. Emily asked her master if he had lost his mind and if he understood the nature of the battlefront. With a fearful expression, Emily told Cyan that the battlefront was teeming with wicked and terrifying demonic beasts. Velius is the sole location on the continent that can be termed a battlefront. Velius and Lemea Valley are divided by a river, with Lemea Valley known as the front line. The front line is a ferocious battlefield where conflicts with demons have persisted for centuries. Due to the perilous nature of the battlefront, Willius opposed Cyan's request, informing our hero that he would only grant his wish under one condition. Willius challenged his son to become worthy enough to venture to Lemea Valley within a month. Cyan was surprised by the condition, uncertain how his father would assess his worth. Our protagonist clenched his fist and assured himself that he would enhance his physical strength before the month's end. Cyan recognized that he was still significantly weaker than his peers. Our hero realized he was quite fortunate to have retained his combat instincts after his regression. He was certain that he wouldn't have been able to defeat Kranz without them. After examining his body, Cyan managed to summon a small amount of mana. Our protagonist realized he could become stronger much more rapidly. He decided to promptly commence his training. Before our hero could take action, someone burst into his room, calling out his name. The intruder was a girl named Alice. Alice swiftly approached Cyan and seized his collar, demanding to know if he was insane. While Alice was shaking Cyan, Emily simply greeted her. Alice was shocked to learn that her brother had asked their father to send him to the battlefront and demanded an explanation from our hero. Cyan was speechless and pleaded with Alice to release his collar. Alice released her brother, believing Cyan was overconfident due to his victory over Kranz. She instructed her brother to accompany her to the roof. Upon reaching the roof, Alice ordered her younger sibling to draw his sword. She declared that she would permit him to go to the battlefront if he could endure her attacks for 3 minutes. Our hero was surprised by this and questioned whether Alice truly needed to fight him. Alice informed her brother that she didn't want to hear his opinion and asked him to answer only one question. Alice inquired if Cyan was pursuing the family's title. Cyan was surprised by this, realizing that Alice was concerned about him because of the title. Unfortunately for Alice, our protagonist had no interest in the title. Observing that her brother didn't respond, Alice assumed he was indeed after the title. She instructed Cyan to draw his sword. Our hero unsheathed his blade, incredulous that he had to face both Kranz and his sister in a single day. The moment Cyan drew his sword, Alice rushed to attack him. Our protagonist was shocked by this and swiftly parried his sister's strike. Alice was astonished, unable to believe that a 10-year-old had managed to block her attack. Cyan was surprised to see that Alice would go all out against a boy with whom she had a 7-year age gap. Alice decided to retreat, unable to comprehend what was happening. Alice knew that a rapier is a very light blade, yet Cyan was able to block an attack from her longsword. Alice wondered if her brother was simply lucky. With a menacing smile, Alice told her brother that he possessed good intuition. When Cyan observed the smile on Alice's face, he realized he was in trouble. Alice began to assault our hero more intensely. Cyan managed to block the attack, but was gradually being forced back. Alice leaped and delivered a powerful blow to Cyan. Our hero barely managed to block the attack, using his sword to slowly push his sister back. Alice was shocked by this display. As the boy's sword inched closer to Alice, he realized the situation was getting dangerous. Cyan twisted his sword to push his sister back and stepped away to create a large gap between them. While trying to catch his breath, Cyan understood that he could have made a grave mistake. If he hadn't twisted his sword, he might have killed Alice. The swordsmanship used by Mist members, known as thick fog, mainly focuses on killing. Because Cyan lacks the strength to fully control his techniques, it's challenging for him to fight without causing lethal harm. Cyan was unsure of what to do and wondered if the 3 minutes his sister mentioned had passed. Noticing his trembling hand, he realized he had been channeling mana into his sword to compensate for his lack of strength and was nearing his limit. As he pondered, Alice began chanting, asking the earth and wind to become her sword. Cyan was shocked to hear her casting a 6-star magic spell. Alice took a stance, gathering mana in her sword, which became known as the Aqua Blade. The boy couldn't believe what he was witnessing and thought his sister had lost her mind. The skill was powerful enough to kill him. As Alice activated the skill, she repeatedly told herself she must not lose. Cyan, standing at the edge of the roof, knew he would fall out of the castle if he managed to block the attack. Trusting his plan, he rushed to attack Alice. She raised her sword in the air, accumulating a large amount of energy. As Cyan approached his sister, he silently hoped for someone to emerge from concealment. When he got close, Alice assumed a fighting stance, preparing to strike her younger sibling. The moment Cyan came within range, Alice swung her blade. Ulkin suddenly appeared, urging Alice to halt. He drew his own sword to block Alice's attack, while simultaneously grabbing Cyan to immobilize him. A radiant glow emanated as Ulkin intercepted the strike. He admonished Alice for being excessively harsh towards a younger opponent. Cyan felt a wave of relief upon seeing Ulkin reveal himself, realizing he would have sustained serious injuries had Ulkin not intervened to protect him. Hearing Ulkin's words, Alice regained her composure. She swiftly embraced Cyan, wrapping her arms around him. She expressed remorse to her younger brother for nearly harming him, explaining that she had momentarily lost control. As tears streamed down her face, Alice confessed to Cyan that she had fought him seriously in an attempt to prevent him from going to the battlefield. Cyan harbored no ill feelings towards Alice's actions, understanding that his sister often pushes herself too hard. Alice is an exceptional student, having achieved S rank in all her subjects at the academy.